like and subscribe. Now, what fictional character should have been hit with a huge lawsuit at the end of the story? Pretty much every adult in a series of unfortunate events. Given that the in-universe legal system of ASOUE allows a man to marry his adopted 13-year-old daughter, coerced by a threat to her baby sister's life, under the guise of a fraudulent play, presided over by a judge unaware she is acting in an official capacity, and absolute none of this legally invalidates that marriage, and the only thing that saved Violet was a loophole that her signature doesn't count if written with one's non-dominant hand. I don't have high hopes for the Baudelaires in civil court. I get the feeling that world is split between very stupid people and very smart people. But even the smart people can act very stupid. They become complacent because of their intelligence. The majority of people are stupid and complacent. Many of the heroic adults are intelligent, well-read, scientific, etc. But they are complacent and trusting. Olaf is pretty stupid, but he's far from complacent, constantly scheming and manipulating. And the Baudelaires are both intelligent and non-complacent. It's just no one takes them seriously. What about Montgomery? But Mr. Poe should rot. FMR. Poe. All my homies hate MR. Poe. Montgomery was a sweet cinnamon roll and the only one sane enough to care for the kids. Yeah, even with the most dangerous viper in the world that turned out to be a cute, loving thick noodle, he's the only character I liked in the movie other than the kids. Never read the books. I'm going for the low-hanging malpractice suit at his house. In one episode, DNR, Season 1 Episode 9, Cuddy tells him, "When I hired you I also set aside $50,000 a year for legal expenses. So far you've come in under budget. Seems low considering neurosurgeons all have to pay over $100k a year in malpractice insurance, and there's a neurosurgeon on his team if I recall. He technically got one and went to jail. He also faked his own death. There's a whole lot he could be convicted for tbh. House's entire medical staff could also probably be thrown in jail for constantly breaking into people's homes. Some babies are sick. There are 2 possible diseases. What do I do? Oh. I treat half of them for one disease, the other half for the other disease. Sometime later. Damn. Turns out they have none of those diseases and actually a different third disease, so half of them die. I somehow managed to save the other half, and thankfully the patients don't open a huge lawsuit against me or the hospital lady who got the babies sick by rubbing her nose on teddy bears. To be fair, he only gave the medication to 2 children and 1 died. Then he gave the working medication to the rest. But yeah, House is a walking lawsuit, especially when he helps the mob. John Hammond from Jurassic Park. His legal team would spare no expense. From memory, there's a deleted scene from The Lost World, Jurassic Park, where that happens. It's a boardroom discussion about payouts to the families of the workers who died and to the British family that accidentally stumbled upon Isla Sorna. Because of it, the board agrees to sack Hammond and make Ludlow head of England with immediate effect. Ludlow then comes up with a plan to get their money back by opening up the park in San Diego using dinosaurs from Isla Sorna. Come to think of it, removing that scene kind of removes a shitload of context from the rest of the film. The ridiculous matter of the boat whose crew had been killed by a T-Rex which was still locked in the cargo hold apparently also had an explanation which got cut for time. The crew weren't killed by the T-Rex, but by raptors which subsequently jumped overboard. But stories need to make sense in their own right, and not rely on supplementary materials. In the book it's established loud and clear he was in the wrong with his questionable business practices and corner cutting. Hammond is a much bigger head in the novel. In the book, he gets eaten. The Power Rangers, they're a paramilitary group and are, almost, never officially sanctioned to operate by their relevant municipalities. They cause massive amounts of destruction from their fights and by not warning anyone about the enemies they battle. I love the description of the Power Rangers as a paramilitary group. Actually, in a few of the comics they are labeled as such. It's interesting, in Power Rangers Lost Galaxy, they are actually sanctioned to protect the space colony ship they are on. No matter what. Basically they are lost in space. In the next season, Lightspeed Rescue, they are a government funded group of first responders and I'm good at it. But yeah, lots of damage. Season after that, Time Force, they are actually getting competition from the private sector from a PMC trying to reproduce their future weapons tech and Zords to fight the monsters constantly wrecking the city. Then I grew up and stopped following the show. The Hulk. Good luck with that. Why you have to pay us 350 million in damages, or what? Sterling Archer in about every episode of Archer. Mallory Archer for all the workplace health and safety violations in just about every episode of Archer. You forgot about the whole season where they tried to become drug lords. Krieger for everything. Season 3, maybe 4, the government comes after them and arrests them all for this very reason. Fun fact. The reason in real life the story went this way is because they needed a way to immediately stop calling themselves ISIS for obvious reasons. When they started the show, that name hadn't been taken. So the writers were like, welp, guess the show needs drastic changes this season. Jim Carrey's character at the end of Liar Liar would be on every no-fly list imaginable, and in prison for such a huge number of offenses for breaking into an airport and stealing a set of air stairs, putting an entire flight at risk, etc., etc. One of those ask a real lawyer things actually went into detail about how his behavior during the Cole's divorce hearing would have gotten him disbarred before he even had a chance to call his client to the stand. Your Honor, he's badgering the witness. It says witness. One more word out of you. Emma, read, and I'll hold you in contempt. I hold myself in contempt. Why should you be any different? Emma, read. It is out of sheer morbid curiosity I'm allowing this freak show to continue any further. What a great movie. The Umbrella Corporation. I'm sure litigation is real high on the priority list in a zombie apocalypse. The gang from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia should be bankrupt from lawsuits and or in jail by now from all the stuff they've done. The Christmas episode where Charlie attacks Santa in the mall would have landed him some serious jail time. He probably would have chosen to represent himself in court too and got a few more years tacked onto his sentence. Due to their aerial locomotion, Santa's flying reindeer, and therefore Santa, fall under bird law. It would be well within Charlie's capabilities to defend himself within that legal framework. I always felt bad for some of the other characters that fell into ruin because of them. Remember when Frank attempts to find a new crew to run with and completely legally destroyed that new cruise bar with lawsuits? First episode to come to mind was when Mac and Charlie beat the shit out of those kids. Those kids deserved it. If we want to talk about ruining lives, how could we possibly forget cricket? I'd say almost 1 in 3 episodes should land one of them in jail for a couple years, with at least one a season landing all of them in jail. How is Dennis not being constantly questioned by the police for both Ari and murder? I always thought it was a bit of meta commentary. In traditional sitcoms generally everything returns to the status quo, so that the shows could be shown in any order. This means that nothing ever changes or had any consequences. IOSIP plays with this by having horrible people live in a sitcom world they never experience the consequences of their actions. However, the people in their orbit do. Dewey from School of Rock. Yay, I'm not sure how he avoided any kind of charge, even after the K.K. Rock show. There must have been one parent who was like, I'm still calling the cops. He'd have been mega offended if the kids performed badly. Isn't it funny in retrospect how this battle of the bands was in the middle of the day on a work school day, and yet the venue was packed? The entire psych crew along with the Santa Barbara PD. You know that's right. Come on son. Barry Benson. I was about to say bro imagine suing a bee but then I realized it's the same bee who sued a corporation. The FA who ran the Truman Show. The fact that the government never put a stop to the show experiment and very few people even batted an eye about it, makes me wonder about the state of their government. Like was it some sort of dictatorship or something? Yeah, the moment Truman turns 18 he's being held against his will. Funny that movie was on TV and I just watched it again. Truman would have been able to sue for hundreds of millions. Then the money and fame would get to him. I think Truman would have had a mental breakdown after leaving. He would have been one of the most famous people ever. He wouldn't understand the hounding. Everyone using him wanting him to do business with them. Probably would have started using drugs. Overdosed a few years later. Everyone knowing every single intimate detail about you. Trying to come to terms it was all fake. He would be extremely paranoid his entire life and have a complete existential crisis leading to either suicide or drug abuse leading to death. He'd spend the rest of his life convinced he was constantly being watched. Chris from Total Drama. Also, the chainsaw murderer, I'm pretty sure he went to prison at one point, though not necessarily for putting every contestant's life in danger. If I remember correctly, wasn't it for dumping toxic waste? Chris Mclean is actually in the villains section of Wikipedia. If you search it up, it has a very long list of all of his crimes. It's still running, but I can only imagine all the labor laws Mr. Krabs has broken. You really think Nick will ever end SpongeBob? Not as long as it makes money. Isn't there an episode where Mr. Krabs, SpongeBob, and Patrick break into a house to steal panties? Mr. Krabs' mom's panties, to be exact. Willy Wonka, I mean, isn't it obvious? Haha, he's the inspiration for my question actually. That Mean Girls family, they'd have that factory condemned and Wonka arrested. Ferris Bueller, everything that goes on with the car, hijacking a parade float, or trespassing throughout the neighborhood. Man, the 80s were a different time. The nerds from Revenge of the Nerds. Yes, the people they were getting revenge at were absolute jerks, but the nerds committed sex crimes in retaliation. Didn't one of them marry someone? Michael Scott, a lot of the office employees too. Dwight and Jim had some instant fired moments. I mean, you had near prostitution that benefited the company that they blatantly ignored and threatened the reporting HR rep with termination over. Michael was involved in numerous auto accidents, including the injuring of a pedestrian. Bringing a gun to an office is already against most workplace policies, but even if it wasn't, a negligent discharge from effing around with it should be, or the police will escort your dummy from the property situation. There is a law firm that actually ran a blog about this every week. Every character in Grey's Anatomy, lols. I remember how in the 6th ever episode, their boss walked into Meredith and a friend illegally performing an autopsy on a patient despite not having permission to do so, and were informed they could permanently lose their licenses, and they were allowed to continue. That was not Meredith, but yes, lol. My mother is a nurse and cringes at the whole show. Mayo, Izzy and Alex probably would have gotten in massive trouble for breach of ethics when they got romantically involved with their patients. Yes, not to mention Izzy cut an LVAD wire. No idea how she came back, lol. TV magic, I guess. I remember Legal Eagle and Mike reviewed the show and remarked on how unrealistic it is. Vernon Dursley from Harry Potter, child abuse, both verbally and possibly physically. A general question on Harry Potter law: does the Muggle justice system apply to magical folk since they are human, or are they somehow separated? The implication is that they're separate. The 6th book suggests that while the Prime Minister is informed of the existence of magic, they don't ever speak to or cooperate with the Muggle government unless there is some kind of national crisis happening. So I think the canon answer is no. The justice systems are entirely separate, with the wizards employing memory erasure and data falsification if somehow the Muggle government does get involved. Doc Brown from Back to the Future. Yeah, sure. When he agreed to build a nuclear bomb for those terrorists, he was just joking. Jack Black in School of Rock. Basically impersonating a teacher and kidnap some kids, lol. Sounds like serious jail time. Jack and the Beanstalk. Jack repeatedly tricked his way into a house to steal stuff. When asked about it, lied, and committed murder and damage to the environment. And I bet giant beanstalk are endangered plants. And then Jack chopped down what was the world's last beanstalk, adding murder and ecological terrorism to the theft, enticement, and trespass charges already mentioned. And all the giant's children didn't have a daddy anymore, but he got away with it and lived happily ever after, without so much as a guilty twinge about what he had done, which proves that you can be excused for just about anything if you are a hero, because no one asks inconvenient questions. Susan Stohellett, Hogarth, Terry Pratchett. Barney from How I Met Your Mother would 100% have more sexual assault allegations than Harvey Weinstein and Bill Cosby combined. I subscribe to the theory that Ted, as the narrator of the story, exaggerates Barney's womanizing to make himself look better in comparison. Probably still jealous about him and Robin. Because of its wanton destruction. That hungry caterpillar. I dunno. I don't think his destruction extends to small claims court, let alone becomes worth a lawsuit. The monetary value of 1 apple, 2 pears, 3 plums, 4 strawberries, 5 oranges, a slice of cake, an ice cream cone, a pickle, a slice of Swiss cheese, a piece of salami, a lollipop, A sausage, a muffin and a piece of watermelon tops out at maybe $10.20, and we could even argue that the Swiss cheese was untouched, because who knows what holes were already there. Now, if the leaf turned out to be from a very valuable plant, you might have a case, but at that point, can you even sue anything? One could easily argue that the butterfly, due to extensive physical and mental changes undergone during metamorphosis, is not legally culpable for the actions of the caterpillar. It's a lose-lose, and I'd suggest you avoid the legal fees. The caterpillar is essentially judgment-proof. Any rom-com protagonist should be faced with a few stalking charges and maybe some sexual harassment ones as well. Let's not forget about sexual assault. Very few women are actually okay with the forced kiss. That whole pinning up against the wall when she's saying no. That's gonna be a no for me, dog. Jason Mendoza from The Good Place. I mean, the only reason why he didn't face criminal charges is because he died. Michael's face when Jason figures it out in the montage will always be my favorite moment in that show. Jason figured it out. Jason. Yeah, this one hurts. My headcanon is that he's basically been on probation from the time he was like 15 to the day he died. They keep letting him out on bail because he's not really a flight risk and he never gets caught doing anything worse than petty larceny and vandalism. It helps that he's charming, dumb enough to seem harmless, and knows when to keep his mouth shut, as we learn in the first season. Also, he runs a dance crew out of the local community center, and we know that a lot of the members would be out committing crimes if he wasn't keeping them busy. He's a pillar of the community who nobody in power realizes is a drug-dealing arsonist. One of the best tropes about Trailer Park Boys: they open the season by getting out of jail. They end the season by going back to jail. They do something lawsuit worthy every episode. Umbrage, or beaten by an irate parent for abusing their kid. Imagine torturing students who just want to learn. Filch's biggest wish. Lara Croft easily. Destruction of heritage sites. Destruction of property. Illegal possession of firearms. Manslaughter. Illegal detention. Causing a calamity. I have two. Peter Griffin has committed several federal offenses and has brutally murdered tons of people. You may get mad at me, but Michael Scott, he has done a lot of things that are considered illegal. Hitting Meredith with his car, held a pizza boy hostage, and several counts of what might be considered harassment. If Peter was convicted in a court of law, he would get either death row or a life sentence. If you're saying Peter, I'd also definitely also say that Eric Cartman should be locked away. He fed Scott Tenorman his parents. He tried to finish what Hitler started. He stole a whale, with help from friends, from the aquarium and sent it to the moon. He committed major election fraud. Recently, he filed a false report to get Kyle's family sent to detention centers. And I completely agree about Michael Scott. Indiana Jones. He did quite a few illegal things, like grave robbing, stealing artifacts and helping a Chinese mafia. Chatillal. Dr. Jones. Wasn't it the Sultan of Madagascar who threatened to cut off your head if you ever returned to his country? Indiana Jones. No, it wasn't my head. Chatillal. Then your hands. Perhaps? Indiana Jones. No, it wasn't my hands. It was my misunderstanding. Wonder in WandaVision. The number of lawsuits that the Avengers would be saddled with would destroy most businesses. I'm sure she did, but they'd have to find her first. Next Disney Plus series just follows a character going around delivering subpoenas to the Avengers. Chris Farley's character in Black Sheep. The dude takes a police car, evades arrest, then holds up the cheating governor's election celebration by taking a hostage and having a conspirator with a rocket launcher threaten the audience. Then they all just laugh it off and he goes back to work with kids. Tony Stark would have had to go on a very long hiatus from being Iron Man in 2015 due to being swamped with thousands of lawsuits and various criminal charges after his negligence resulted in the birth of an army that orchestrated the destruction of a Wakandan South African city and the annihilation of an entire country. And the entire Earth had it succeeded. Captain America. Civil suit. Subtitle: Infinite Lawyers. Turning action movies into class action movies. The Avengers as a whole, no. They did get lawsuits, didn't they? In Age of Ultron, the country Hulk rampaged in was mad. They were put under the Accords. Half their members got jailed cause of civil war and all that Even when Cap busted them out of the jail, they had to live incognito, and after Infinite War lawsuit didn't matter much, did they? I am pretty sure Avengers were like under hundreds of lawsuits, but they were American pretty boys and America won't exactly hand them over to some poor A nation, right? If you noticed correctly, as soon as trouble moved to Europe, they were put under accords. MI6 from the Bond franchise would have to have a financial reconciliation on whether or not saving the world was worth the billions of dollars of destruction across the globe, totally depleting the crown's treasury. They are sending their heavies who don't exist into hostile authoritarian regimes to kill war criminals with global scale power, and you want to annoy them with lawyers? Reminds me of the scene in Dark Knight, I think, where dude tries to blackmail Bruce Wayne because he figures out he's Batman. Fox just lays it down for him and asks if he really wants to do this, and he shuts up. Azula is literally a war criminal. Every single superhero ever. The amount of property damage is insane. Though I did like the nod to this in Jupiter's Legacy, where the Utopian tells Paragon you're paying for that in regards to the building that he damaged. The real reason for secret identities. Spider-Man has no legal presence, no assets, no address, no phone number, no tax records. How are you going to sue him? This was the case in Incredibles lol. Like that one. You didn't save my life. You ruined my death. Hem. She deserves a ref ton more than just a lawsuit. She got a ref ton more than a lawsuit. Specifically, she got tossed in Azkaban. I both love and hate that literally everyone knows who you're referring to.